Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us this lunchtime. It's really great to have some of the same people coming in again. Welcome to the Evidence to Practice session for June. And I'm going to start us off today with karakia to bring in the positive energies. Tūtawa mai I runga, tūtawa mai I raro, tūtawa mai I roto, tūtawa mai I waho, ki tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumie, hui, taiki. Kia ora koutou, ko Cheryl Han Tokuingua. I'm the Chief Advisor in the Centre for Family Violence and Sexual Violence Prevention, and pleased to be here again today to host another great session sharing research, insights and findings. Today's session, we're pleased to welcome Tadhg, Daly and Laura Adlam, who are our colleagues from within the justice sector, and they're going to share some of the latest findings from the NZCVS, the New Zealand Crime Victims Survey. It's a really important survey that we use a lot because it provides information about victimisations in New Zealand, and it really captures crimes that haven't been reported, which we know is really important for family violence and sexual violence, seeing that most people who experience those forms of violence don't report it to police or to services. So Tadhg and Laura are in the Sector Insights team and the Research and Evaluation team inside the Ministry of Justice, and they've both been co-authors on this research. Oh, Tadhg has been the lead on the research, sorry, I should have said that. After the presentations, you'll have a chance to have some of the questions answered, so please look for the Q&A at the top, put in your questions. I'll be facilitating some of those after we've run through the presentation of around half an hour. And just a reminder that we always want these spaces to be safe and inclusive. We're going to be covering topics of family violence and sexual violence that can be difficult and distressing for people. So please do what you need to do to look after yourself. Take some time out, talk to people. We're going to post the links, or we have posted the links to support services and phone lines and web chats over there in the Q&A. So have a look there to see what supports are available. For this version of Teams, you can just see the presenters today, and you won't be able to see who's participating, but you will be able to contribute to the Q&A, and then you'll also be able to watch it on YouTube later on when we put that up. Just a reminder too that the Q&A is public, so people are going to see the questions that you post there. Now, I'm going to hand over to Tadhg and Laura, who are going to take us through the presentation. Thank you so much.
Cool. Kia ora koutou, my name's Tadhg Daly. As Cheryl said, thank you, Cheryl, for the introduction. I'm a principal analyst in the research and evaluation team at the Ministry of Justice, and have been working on the New Zealand Crime Victims Survey since it began, so for the last 8 years. I'll let Laura introduce herself as well.
Kia ora koutou, my name is Laura Adlam. I've been in the research and evaluation team for a year, but in Sector Insights for about 3 years, and yeah, have supported on this key stories as well as our other NZCVS key results. So that time.
Are we sharing the? Oh, now we're sharing them. Cool. Thank you.
Takes a second.
Cool. So today we are going to talk you through some selected results from Cycle 8 of the New Zealand Crime and Victims Survey. So these are interviews that we did between October 2024 and October 2025. And it's an annual survey. It's a rolling annual survey. So basically, we've been rolling it for 8 cycles, or that's 8 years of data. And so we're talking about last year's data today, and some of the stuff that we've been reporting from that. So just to give you a little bit of a rundown on how the New Zealand Crime and Victims Survey works, it's an annual nationwide face-to-face sample survey. So we randomly select houses using Stats New Zealand frameworks from around the country, and we go and interview people face-to-face. The survey asks people about things like personal and household crimes, interpersonal violence, theft and damage offences, fraud, burglary, trespass and vehicle offences, but does not include things like retail crime, crime against businesses, crimes against children, because we only talk to people who are 15 years old or above. We don't ask about drug offences, and we don't cover murder or manslaughter. One of the key advantages of the New Zealand Crime and Victims Survey is that it measures both reported and unreported crime. So the way that we do that is when we go to people's houses, we ask them about the things that they're experiencing. We give them screeners. For instance, we don't ask you whether you've been assaulted. We ask whether anybody's harmed you in the past year. And then we ask for a description of the incident. Following the survey, that description goes through some coders who decide whether or not, in conjunction with police, whether that incident would meet the threshold for what would be considered a crime in New Zealand. And during the survey, we also ask whether that incident was or was not reported to the police. So that's how we sort of come up with reported and unreported crime rates. In 2025, we interviewed 8,008 New Zealanders with a 72% response rate. And out of this, we've released 2 products this year. We've released a key results report and a key stories report. We'll mainly be talking about the key stories report, or a couple of stories out of that. But just to give sort of some context about what our key results report does, is it just provides sort of annual headline statistics on what's going on with victimisation in New Zealand. So in 2025, 28% of New Zealand adults were the victim of a crime. That has come down a little bit from about 32% in 2023. And that's been driven by decreases across both personal offences and household offences, which we'll hear a little bit more about soon from Laura. So more specifically, we've seen over time some decreases in interpersonal violence, violent offending, family offences, and on the household side of things, we've been seeing a decrease in burglary over time as well. Some of the other things measured in the survey, as I've talked about before, so burglary, vehicle offences, trespass, theft and damage offences, and fraud and cybercrime as well. So in our key stories report, we honed in on a few different areas, or a few different trends that we were seeing for the 2025 data. And 2 of these stories related to family violence. So those are the 2 that we're going to cover today. So that's the story about there being fewer victims experiencing family offences, but the number of incidents has increased. And half of family violence victims go without help. Timely, responsive and visible support could change that. And just to give you a bit of context about what family offences are when we're talking about them in this talk. So in the survey, we measure interpersonal violence, which covers offence types like assault, robbery, sexual assault, harassment and threatening behaviour, and personal and household property damage, as well as damage to motor vehicles. And when we ask that for family offences, we ask people during the survey who was involved or who was the perpetrator of the incident. And if they say it's a family member, like an intimate partner, a current partner, an ex-partner, or another family member, then that will be considered a family offence. Cool, so I will pass it on to Laura to talk about the first story.
Thanks, Tadhg. So as Tadhg already mentioned, the overview for the first story in the Key Stories report is relating to family offending. So the kind of overall storyboard for this story is that fewer victims have experienced family offending. However, the number of incidents have increased. Therefore, reducing repeated and ongoing harm is key to further reduction in family violence and family offending. So overall, we've seen a downward trend for family offending in New Zealand. In 2025, 1.4% of the New Zealand population has experienced offending by a family member. This has decreased from 2.2% in 2018, which continues that overall decreasing trend with the exception of that one-off temporary spike in 2024. But overall, this reduction between 2018 and 2025 is a reduction from 87,000 victims in 2018 to 62,000 victims in 2025. So when we break this down by the perpetrators, we can see decreases for where the offender was a current partner from 0.9% to 0.4%, or another family member besides an intimate partner from 1% to 0.6%. However, we can see stability / a very slight increase for where the offender was an ex-partner from 0.46% to 0.53%, so small increase there. This is kind of consistent with research that tells us that the risk of family violence often persists or escalates after separation, particularly through things like coercive control, harassment, and stalking by former partners. So within this overall decrease in family offending, some of the drivers are one-off incidents. So this is victims who experienced only one crime, one incident, from 1.4% to 0.8%. Alongside incidents perceived as less serious. So victims are asked to rate their perceived seriousness of an incident on a scale of 0 to 10. Less serious is those that are ranked 0 to 6, moderate is 7 to 9, and high is a 10 out of 10. So we've seen the incidents perceived as less serious halve, so 1.4% in 2018 to 0.7% in 2025. And then we've seen some stability in the moderately and higher seriousness, which kind of tells us that the most serious harm remains stable and kind of concentrated among those who experience repeat victimization, which we'll talk a little bit more to soon. But alongside this decrease in overall victimization, we've seen an increase in reporting to police and seeking help, which will obviously be spoken more to in the next story. But generally, we've seen more victims reporting to police. So this has increased from 35% of victims of family offending have reported at least one incident to police in 2022, compared to 43% in 2025. A big driver of this is highly victimized adults, which again we'll speak more to soon, but this is adults who have experienced 4 or more incidents of family offending, which has increased from 43% to 53%. We've also seen an increase in victims being approached by organisation or friends and family for help, increased from 32% to 46% between 2022 and 2025. And then we've seen more help seeking in general. So people seeking that help from an organisation or people for help. So overall, these findings, so the overall decrease in victimisation and the increase in help seeking and reporting to police altogether kind of points towards a shift in the landscape in family violence in New Zealand, where fewer adults are becoming victims for the first time. But unfortunately, this isn't the whole picture when we dig a little bit deeper into that data. So although fewer adults are experiencing family offending, the total number of incidents has increased from 5.2 per 100 adults in 2018 to 5.9 per 100 adults in 2025. So this is a 24% increase from 207,000 incidents in 2018 to 256,000 incidents in 2025. So there can be multiple incidents for each victim, which is why this number can be higher. When we look at this by distribution of victims and incidents, we can see that the makeup is quite different for victims and incidents. So I'll explain this clustered graph. So in the top graph, we're looking at the proportion of victims of family offending by the level of victimization that they've experienced. And then the bottom graph, we're looking at the proportion of incidents experienced by victims of family offending by the level of victimization they've experienced. So for each of these, the blue lines are one-off offences, victims of, never like to say only, but victims of one crime. Yellow line is victims of multiple crimes. So the blue and the yellow together will always make up 100. It's kind of how this proportional graph works. And then a subset of that is the red line, which is highly victimized. So victims who have experienced 4 or more incidents of family offending. So in the top one, we can see that, as we've already touched on, proportion of one-off victims have decreased, whereas the proportion of victims of family offences who were victims of more than one incident has increased from 35% to 46%. And then within that, the proportion of those highly victimised victims has increased from 20 to 31%. And in the bottom one, we can see that, again, those one-off incidents are the lowest and have decreased. On the other hand, incidents involving repeat victimisation has increased from 73% to 87%. A big driver for this is where the victims are highly victimised, which has increased from 58% to 78%. Looking further into this incident increase, we can see multiple drivers for this. So where the offender is, where the perpetrator is an ex-partner, we've seen an increase in incidents from 1.3 per 100 adults in 2018 to 2.5 per 100 adults in 2025. This suggests that incidents involving ex-partners are more likely to be repeated or ongoing. And then looking at the victim demographics, we can see that the rise in incidents is not evenly distributed. Just so as a reminder, the New Zealand population was 5.2 per 100 in 2018 to 5.9 per 100 in 2025. So we can see that all of these here sit above that. So we can see increases for incidents involving disabled adults, Māori adults, European women, LGBTQIA+, where victims are in financial distress and where victims are separated, divorced, or widowed. Findings are consistent with research which shows that Māori, disabled, and LGBTQIA+, and particularly women, experience higher rates of repeat and severe interpersonal violence. Findings overall align with existing research. Overall tells us that repeat intimate partner violence is common, often escalates over time, and is most likely during periods of separation. Tells us that harm is becoming increasingly concentrated among a smaller group of adults, so seeing victimization go down, but those victims are experiencing a lot of incidents. That repeat harm is often entrenched and persistent, even when overall prevalence declines, and that the rise in incidents is not evenly distributed. Overall, increased media and social media attention, as well as declining social acceptability of violence and controlling behaviour, could be contributing to higher reporting and help seeking, which could be contributing to the overall decline in family violence. This aligns with some findings, for example, the New Zealand Social Attitude Survey and the It's Not Okay campaign, which tells us that overall public concern about family violence is high, that there is strong support for government action and legislation. There's an overall increase in willingness to intervene, as well as an increased public understanding of what constitutes family violence, and that trust in police responses to family harm has increased. and just kind of generally seeing less tolerance for family violence in general. Improvements kind of align with legislation, for example, the Family Violence Act, and then of course, Te Reo insights in general, for example, that have come from Social Investment Agency have helped to shape government investment in early intervention and cross-agency responses. So overall, what these findings tell us is that prevention may be working, but it isn't necessarily reaching everyone. Yes, we're seeing fewer people becoming victims, but those victims are experiencing a lot of incidents. Repeat harm is hard to stop and continues to affect some groups more than others. So that's where we're seeing that disproportionate impact among Māori women, LGBTQIA plus disabled adults in particular. When we look at existing efforts and what's already in place, multi-agency responses do work, but challenges exist such as resourcing constraints and incomplete feedback loops, which can impact consistency of support. Some of these efforts that are already underway in New Zealand do look to address repeat harm. So, for example, there are some programs in place that support victims to remain safely in their homes following separation. And then some of the legislation that I've already touched on, like the Domestic Violence Victims Protection Act, which is aimed to reduce barriers to safety and help seeking by supporting victims' financial and workplace stability. And then some other, the Family Violence Act, the Domestic Violence Act, and then of course Te Reo, the National Strategy to Eliminate Family Violence and Sexual Violence. Overall, public concern about family violence remains high, which could be contributing to some of that decrease in that one-off offending that we're seeing, as well as some of more of that help seeking and more of that reporting to police. Aligns with findings from, for example, the New Zealand Social Attitudes Survey and the It's Not Okay campaign. Overall, the findings tell us that family violence in New Zealand is changing rather than going away. So these things in place appear to have made substantial progress in reducing first-time and lower severity victimisation. Some ongoing work, including integrated responses and early intervention initiatives and community-led approaches, are pretty central to supporting those who continue to experience that repeat and serious harm, those higher incident rates. Cool. Thank you. I will throw it back to Tadhg.
Cool. Yeah, thank you, Laura. The other story, the second story that we wanted to cover today was on help seeking. The main points of the story are that most years fewer than half of people affected by family violence seek support. More adults seek support from friends and whānau than organisations or police, and that support needs to be constantly available and responsive to a variety of needs. So I'll go through all the details of those points now. So just to give you a better idea of what I'm going to be talking about when I talk about the graphs that are coming up. So in the survey, we have victims of family offences, which is all the graphs that Laura's just been talking about. So that's those category of offences that I talked about at the start. But in the survey, we also ask a series of questions about controlling behaviours by a family member. So we ask about quite a long list of questions to do with whether people are being monitored on their phones by family members, if they are being restricted in their finances, if they are sort of suffering from their partner abusing pets. So a lot of questions like that, which fall more under the realm of controlling behaviours. And so anybody who answers positively, so sort of indicates that they are a victim of controlling behaviour by a family member or a victim of a family offence, get these help-seeking questions in the survey. And the help-seeking questions cover these areas. So we ask whether people sought help or were approached by the following groups. So you've got family or whānau, friends or neighbours, church, community, helplines, work support, Māori organisations, Citizens Advice Bureau, support organisations, court victims advisors, community law centre, ACC, other government agencies and health professionals. So talking about that whole group, if you've either experienced a family offence or a controlling behaviour by a family member, about only 48% of those people sought help from somebody based on that list that I just showed you. And this has been consistent across the last 4 years. So that's while many victims do reach out, many do not. And just to make it a point of difference, so in Laura's talk, she's talked a little bit how help seeking has increased. That is for victims of family offences specifically. But when you combine the victims of family offences and the victims of controlling behaviours by family members, the help seeking is a lot flatter over time. When we asked the people who did not seek any help why they didn't seek help, the top reasons we get is that they did not need help, they wanted to handle it themselves, it was a private matter, no reason, and one that's sort of important that we'll point out a bit more in this talk is didn't know who to ask or where to go to. And then some of the other reasons, embarrassment, felt no one would help, thought it was normal behaviour, fear of the person people finding out and might not be believed. And when you look at this by demographics, it's quite similar across demographic groups, those reasons for not seeking help, suggesting that different groups and communities face similar barriers when it comes to help seeking. When we dig down a bit into seeking help from organisations versus friends and whānau, so basically when I showed you that list before, the two top ones were did you seek help from a family member or a friend or neighbour, so that will be your friends or family, and then any of those other groups we've just sort of put into organisations. And so for the New Zealand population in general, people are much more likely to seek help from friends and whānau versus organisations. So you're looking at about sort of 42-43% versus around the 24% mark in general. And then once we break that down into demographic groups, we have much higher help seeking for particular groups, especially women, Māori, people who identify as LGBTQIA+, disabled people, and people who have been highly victimised, and they all seek help more across the board, organisations and from friends of whānau, but friends of whānau seems to be the primary help seeking source, followed by the organisations. When we then combine those two groups back together, your friends, whānau and organisations, and we compare it to reporting to police, we see that more adults seek help from those friends, whānau or organisations compared to reporting to the police. And I should just say that this graph isn't an apples to apples comparison. So when we're talking about reporting to police, that's whether they reported a family violence offence to police. But when I'm talking about the other type of help seeking, that's whether they experienced a family violence offence or a controlling behaviour by a family member. If you just look at help seeking for victims of family offences, the help seeking bars, the red bars, are much, much higher. But the trend is the same basically. So people are seeking help more from other sources rather than reporting to the police. And again, we see differences at the demographic level when we break it down by different groups. So you'll see women, Māori, people who identify as LGBTQIA+, disabled people, highly victimised people, much more likely to seek help from those other sources than report what's going on to the police. Interestingly, for men, they're the one group who is more likely to report an incident to the police than seek help from those other sources. And when we look a little bit into why this is going on, we asked some questions in the survey about trust in different parts of the justice system. And so for the New Zealand population overall, people sort of have a little bit more trust for services for victims than they do for, say, the New Zealand police. When you're trying to explain why are they not reporting to police, or why are they seeking help from these other places. But that difference becomes way bigger when you look at, say, your victims of family violence. So much lower trust in police, much higher trust in services for victims. And so that can help explain why you're seeing different types of help seekings for that group. And just a little point, and as I mentioned before, men were more likely to report to the police. Men also have sort of higher trust in the police, but they do also still have high trust for the services for victims. So what does this data tell us? What we think it's telling us is that recovery does not always involve the criminal justice system. So a lot of people's first point of contact is often friends and family. And we know from research that when victims seek help from one source, like friends or whānau, it increases the likelihood that they will seek other kinds of help, so that their friends or whānau might refer them to a service. And that service, or their friends or whānau, may also encourage them to report it to the police. And so what we can learn from this is that friends, family, and whānau are a key resource for supporting victims, that they can sort of often be the first point of contact. And so it can be important to support those people as well, and giving them the resources they need, so that they can help and inform victims correctly. The other thing is that support needs to be visible, timely, and responsive, whether people first reach out. So people are going to different places, but basically everybody needs to be giving a consistent type of response, so that people are encouraged to get the support and help that they need. And one other thing that we just wanted to point out is that there is still a need to promote the services and support that is available. 12% of respondents reported not seeking help because they did not know who to talk to. And this was higher for young people, disabled people, and people who are highly victimized. So those percentages represent thousands of New Zealanders who are impacted by crime, but don't know where to go for support. And so there is an ongoing need for accessible services and clear public awareness about where help is available. And that's it.
Thank you so much. I'll just remove it. Thank you very much for taking us through that. I read it online, but it's so good to have somebody talking us through all of it and pointing us to the right places to focus on. So I'll go to some of the questions in the chat in a second, but I just want to clarify for myself that I've got this right, some of the things that you're saying. So I'm going to start with you, Laura, and the story that you were sharing. You said there are fewer victims experiencing family offences. However, the number of incidents has increased. And for some groups, they're experiencing more incidents of family violence, for example, from ex-partners or disabled adults, Māori, women, LGBTQI, and separated people are experiencing more incidents of family offences. Mm-hmm. And there's a small group of people, well, actually not small, because it's like 1/3, isn't it? 31% of people who are highly victimised, who are experiencing violence, multiple forms of violence. so that the harm is becoming increasingly concentrated amongst a smaller group of adults who are experiencing repeated and serious harm.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, cool. Thank you. We're really concerning, but good to have those really clear messages. For me, that's really important for people who are working at the front line, who are working in multi-agency responses, recognising that, you know, around a third of people that they will be talking to or who come to seek help from them could be people who are highly victimised, experience multiple incidents of violence over time. So not only going to be a one-off. We had a question about that, and the question was just going back to the 1.4%, which I think is the total numbers of victims of family offences. And the question is, when you were referring to that, you talked about the statistics for the total population. So is that an extrapolation from what was found from the 8,000 or so interviews? Did we factually see a reduction in 20,000 victims, or has a survey sample just had less victims as a percentage over the last 12 months of interviewees?
So all of the data is weighted as the in terms of the victimization rate. That's all kind of accounted for in that weighted data that we see, and then we use that weighted data to be able to provide an estimate about these demographics, but also the New Zealand population as a whole. So the 1.4% that we're seeing is an estimate based on an estimate of the data.
Yeah,
Right.
and so you would guess that your random sampling techniques would be capturing a similar number of victims each year, and so that wouldn't be we wouldn't necessarily have reason to assume that there's bias in that particular area based on the methodology of the survey.
Right.
But the benefit of looking at that as a rate instead of the count, which is why I chose to focus a little bit more on the rate rather than the 20,000 reduction, is that the New Zealand population increase is also accounted for in the rate estimate.
Great, thank you. So there might be a reason that some victims of family offences don't want to participate in the survey, but that would be true across time, not necessarily in 1 year.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. And so there's another question, Laura, around this. Could you comment at all about whether there's been an increase in incidents for Pacific peoples and ethnic communities? Since I don't think they were in the data table that you shared.
They weren't. I actually jumped onto the Excel and had a little bit of a look. We do see quite small sample sizes for Pacific and for the ethnic community cohorts. So for 2025, unfortunately, those are both suppressed, which that happens if there's a really small sample size, as well as various other reasons for that. But we have seen, based on the 2018 and 2024 data, we have seen a little bit of an increase. However, we do have to take the 2024 data with a grain of salt, because as I showed at the beginning, that there's that like one-off temporary spike in there. But overall, those numbers actually sit kind of close to what we see in the overall New Zealand population. 3.5 for Pacific people per 100 in 2018 compared to, 5.2 per 100 for the New Zealand population, and 3.4 per 100 for the ethnic communities. But all of those numbers are on the data table, so feel free to have a look.
Great, thank you. And I think we've either shared or we will share the link to the website with all the data tables and other reports on there. Thank you. And so over to the story around help seeking. I think you said around half of victims of family offences and controlling behaviours reach out for help. But when it's just looking at those who've experienced a family offence, that rate jumps. And what was that?
It will be about 83%.
83%.
2025.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a significant number. there's been an increase in victims reporting to police, and that's been driven by the highly victimised adults, where there's been a significant increase there of reporting to police. But still, people are much more likely to seek help from family and friends than from organisations. And there's still a lot of concerning reasons why people don't seek help, which is related to the things we've known, sadly, for many years about seeing it as a private issue and embarrassing and not knowing where to ask for help and felt that they could handle it themselves. And you draw the conclusion that there's still a need to promote help because there's a decent number of people who didn't know what help was available. But then, particularly for young people, disabled people, and highly victimised people as well, which points to me to that real importance of friends and family and people in the community knowing the right things to do and the right things to say and the places to get help so that they can help the people around them get to that support when they need it. I think there was other data that you've reported in the NZCVS that's around the fact that family violence was one of the top issues that people were concerned about across the nation in terms of nationwide issues. Is that right?
Yes, I think so. Yeah. So we ask a series of questions about issues of serious concern, both locally and in New Zealand. I will say that when you ask people about their concerns about those issues nationwide, a high amount of people will show concern. When you ask about it locally, it will always be quite a bit lower than at the national level. So people don't see the same issues in their local neighbourhoods as they see nationwide quite often. And that can be for a number of different reasons.
Yeah. I was wondering about how many of those people are concerned because they're the ones that are getting asked for help. They can see that around in their friends and family. Yeah.
We've seen in other data previously that if you know somebody experiencing family violence, that you're more likely to have experienced it yourself as well. And so often, the people in these communities will often sort of go together. So people knowing about it going on may have also experienced it themselves, and so may have gone through similar things. Might be why they are the preferred option for help seeking as well.
Yeah, that's right. A trusted person. Yeah. Thank you. And so in relation to the help seeking, we've got a question about whether people reporting to police were a subset of all the people who were seeking help, or were they different people? Is that something that you can tell?
No, they're not a subset. So the people reporting to police are anyone who is a victim of a family offence and whether they reported that offence to police. And I think it's around, I can't remember what it is in that slide now, 43%, something like that. Yes, yeah. So it's not a subset of the help seeking group, but it is the out of your victims of family offences.
Right. And so people could have done both, reported to police and other organisations and friends and family.
Yeah, they could have done all. They could have done all three.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I think you mentioned in there around the trust in police and trust in services, and I think there's more data that you report on around trust in the justice system. Is there anything more that you can say about some of those findings?
Yeah, sure. So we now have a series of questions about trust in the justice system overall and trust in different components of the justice system that we're asking annually now. What we see in general is that so trust in the justice system is reasonably high, sort of in the population, or at least people with at least some trust is reasonably high. So that's in your sort of 70 to 80% range, and it goes down to about 40 to 45 for your high trust. But that changes quite dramatically by demographic group. So Maori have much lower trust, much lower levels of high trust. Victims have much lower levels of high trust, and victims of family violence especially have much less trust in the justice system. When you break it down by components, you see the same sort of patterns, but like I've said there, victim services always come out on sort of top for how much people trust in them. So they always have sort of the highest level of trust, followed by police. And then you kind of, as you go through the justice system, the trust gets lower and lower. So trust for components of the courts is a bit lower. And then trust for prison services and the parole board are sort of lowest amongst those groups.
Yeah, thank you. It seems like an important area to dig into a little bit more to understand, because I was thinking it was good to get the information about where people are seeking help, but the next thing we want to know is how useful was that help? Was it effective? Did it provide the right supports? Did it create safety for people? So like understanding that level of information, I think, is really important for us. Which kind of leads me to my last question for both of you. Is there an area where you've been looking at the data and you said, this is really interesting, but we just don't quite have enough in this NZCBS, but I wish a researcher would pick this up and explore this a bit more or dig into this a little bit more to help us understand what's going on here? Is there an area like that you've been thinking about that you'd like to?
Heaps of
There are a couple that you'd like to just throw out there in case anyone is listening. And
I talked a little bit about controlling behaviour. So we have a bunch of sort of controlling behaviour questions in the survey. We did do quite a bit of consultation and work to develop those questions. I think they went in about 2021. But I think there's still a lot of work to be done in that space to really get a better idea of what we're measuring, to get sort of good indicators of controlling behaviour. So at the moment, there's a long list of stuff in there, and we know there's a lot of problems in that space with using a survey to capture that kind of really pattern-based behaviours, and they can be really different depending on the situation. But basically, we've had them in there for the last sort of 4 or 5 years. That data is now all in the IDI. And so anyone who's keen to sort of look at those scales and do validation and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, we haven't had as much time as we would like to have done some more work in that space.
Good. I'm going to pick that one up. Is there anything else that you're thinking of, Laura?
I was speaking about the.
Oh yeah, sure.
Would you like to know?
Oh,
just because you were in the team.
Sure. So basically, we did a series of funded research reports. A couple of years ago, we published them last year. So we had a couple of rounds of funding for external research. Unfortunately, that funding has all dried up. Yeah, so a bunch of universities and research groups wrote some really cool reports, either using our data in the Stats New Zealand IDI or by using the NZCBS panel. So that's another resource that we have available if people want to do research. We asked people in the survey if they're happy to do further research, and about 92% of people say yes, they are happy to participate in that. So we offer that as sort of a research panel that people can apply for as well. But yeah, we have those research reports and some fact sheets, some summary fact sheets that we put up on the website last year, looking at all different kinds of areas of research. So yeah, and all of those are sort of good lead-ins to new areas.
One of them is specific to family and sexual violence, about reporting and about wellbeing outcomes. So that one could be of interest.
Great. Oh, thank you. It's really great, and I think there is so much important information in there, and because it's keeping, we're keeping on getting that updated every year, it's really important for us working in this space to have that latest data to inform our work and to make us think about the approaches that we're taking as well. So I really want to thank you so much, Tadhg and Nora, for joining us, pointing us to the wealth of information that's there in the NZCBS, and encourage people to go and explore it. So yeah, thank you very much. I'm just going to close to today. Hopefully you are getting regularly the invites for these monthly sessions. If you're not, please email us and we'll put you on the list. Look out for the next one next month, and keep safe, and I hope you have a happy and productive day for the rest of the day. Kia tau te rangi Māori e ki runga ina iwi Aotearoa. Haumie, hoie, tai ki e. Kia ora, thanks everyone.